Philipp Girardet, the antitrust partner at Clifford Chance, joins me now for more on this. So, Philipp, thank you so much for joining me. I mean, this is meant to be the biggest overhaul of merger rules in 2 decades. So why is Europe doing this now? What is fundamentally broken?
Hi, good morning. You're quite right. It's the first time the European Commission has really been reviewing its guidance of how it applies its merger laws to big mergers. And it's been a policy discussion at the Commission for the last 2 years or so, which has driven this. There's a sense that the Commission needs to do more to incentivize growth, incentivize competitiveness in Europe. And this is intended to play a role in that process.
And what changes are we going to see?
Look, I mean, we're not going to see any fundamental changes. I think that's the key message. The key message is the European merger control rules remain the same. The laws, the underlying laws are not changing. What has changed is the guidance the competition officials in particular are given the market in terms of how they will apply the law to mergers. The guidance has changed in certain respects, but I would also want to say, look, I mean, if you look at how many mergers the European Commission reviews, it reviews about 400 mergers a year. It did so last year. 4 or so of those were really looked at in great depth in what the Commission calls a phase 2. For those really marginal cases, that this new guidance will likely make some difference.
So only some difference from this. I mean, that's an interesting take on it. It makes me think, well, how is it really going to be able to compete with the US and the kind of the giants that we have in both the US and China? How are we going to create more European champions?
I think the Commission, and I think that is a very important point in the new guidelines. At the heart of the new guidelines is this concept that the Commission wants to hear more from businesses about why their merger is good for the economy, good for competitiveness, what they call the theories of benefit, which is a new concept they've sort of thrown into the guidelines. And I think that is a genuine proposition, that the Commission will be more open to the pro-competitive effects of mergers than perhaps in the past. And for large transformational mergers, for example, where the parties say we need more scale in order to invest, we need more scale to be more resilient in global markets to compete with American or Chinese companies. Those arguments the Commission is telling the market will make more of a difference than perhaps in the past in order to get your deal cleared.
So Philipp, having more guidance, is that going to help any sectors out more than others, whether it's banking, telecoms, defense? What kind of sectors in particular do you think benefit from this?
It's a good question. I think people are incredibly focused on sectors such as telecoms, tech, AI, pharma. These are all markets where European players are looking to scale up. These are markets which are highly investment intensive when it comes to innovation. And these are essentially global markets in many respects. And Europe wants to ensure that its European champions can grow and develop. At least European merger control should facilitate those combinations where possible. That's a key message in the guidance. I think we'll see some interesting test cases in the next 12 months, in particular in telecoms and in tech markets and pharma markets.
You've mentioned, tech and pharma being interesting markets to watch. What about the banking sector? I mean, the European banking sector has long been fragmented. There's been a lot of struggle to get these cross-border mergers through. In cases, I'm thinking of UniCredit, Commerzbank. Does this new framework, could that materially change the outcome?
You're absolutely right to add finance to that list of markets. I think there's a real sense that some of the European banks need greater balance sheets to sort of be more resilient in global markets as markets develop increasingly fast in many respects. So I think banking will be another sector to watch where the guidance can help. I mean, just to go back to the beginning, right? We're looking at guidance which the Commission has put out. I should say it's in draft. They're inviting comments, but we don't expect significant changes to the document. And the Commission is saying, look, we'll start applying some of the principles in that guidance already. But I think the key message is, look, we are open to parties bringing us mergers which lead to a significant scaling up. If you can bring us good evidence why scaling up is good news for competition, good news for these companies who need to compete in global markets. And I think that message is important, but in the end, individual cases will turn on, as always in these cases, right, on how compelling the evidence is the parties can bring to the table. But I wouldn't underestimate the political message which sits behind it. And I think a change in the attitude of the regulator to say, look, we will be engaging with you on these pro-competitive arguments much more than in the past. And that will be important for a small number of really transformational deals, and that could well be also in the banking sector in Europe.
So, Philipp, a couple of final questions before we go. Is there any kind of risk here of unintended consequences? Is there a chance that this could actually backfire and reduce innovation and lead to higher prices for consumers if there is less competition? And also, on another topic, in terms of what we're seeing in the Middle East war, we've had Russia, Ukraine, these energy crises. Is that kind of exposed any structural weaknesses in Europe's economic model?
I mean, on your first question, whether it could backfire, I think it's an interesting debate, because I think that what you hear from von der Leyen's presidency is very much the pro-growth, will be more supportive of scaling up mergers. At the same time, the Commissioner for Competition, Ribera, has been making very clear, look, we're not relaxing merger control. We will protect competition in markets. We will protect consumers. So there will still be a balancing exercise. And the Commission, the competition officials, see their role as very much protecting consumers and getting the balance right. But the way they will go about it will perhaps shift to some extent. That's the key message. In terms of energy and energy supply in Europe, it's just another area where I think the competition officials will be increasingly open to arguments that scaling up is required to create greater regional, pan-European resilience in energy markets than perhaps exists. I mean, in the same vein, you mentioned the Ukraine war. Defense is another area which the Commission is actively encouraging cross-border consolidation of European players. I mean, as a last point, I would say, look, I mean, we're just talking here about European Commission merger control procedures. These matter because the Commission has a one-stop shop for merger control for the very large mergers, but there are lots of other regulators out there too, of course.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Philipp Girardet, the antitrust partner at Clifford Chance, for joining us.